As of this video's recording, I've obtained 447 roller coaster credits across 3 countries in North America. As a result, I've been fortunate enough to have seen some pretty obscure roller coasters. Now, the word obscure can mean a couple of things. Some might think of a rare type of attraction, and that can definitely play a factor for sure. Others might only be obscure from their experience. But the most prominent example I want to talk about today are coasters that a lot of enthusiasts have not had the chance to ride. So I'd like to get right into it. If you enjoyed this video, I ask that you leave a like and subscribe since it really helps the channel out, plus you can always change your mind later. With that being said, I'm happy to present to you my top 15 rarest roller coaster credits, starting with a few honorable mentions. The first is literally any of the coasters at Silverwood in Athol, Idaho. Judging by remoteness, Silverwood might have some of the rarest coaster credits I have, yet it does attract a lot of people every year, way more than it should to be honest. Even though few enthusiasts make it out to this park, they have a prominent stance in North Idaho and Spokane, so that's why their coasters are not making the list. Also, Volcano the Blast Coaster at Kings Dominion is a ride that I just so happened to experience right before its permanent closure in 2018. This was that short period of time when Twisted Timbers and Volcano got to operate simultaneously, which really shaped one of the best top 3 lineups in the world. And although it's a contender for the most sorely missed defunct coaster ever, it was the most popular ride in the park, meaning tons of people got to experience it throughout its lifetime. With that being said, let's dive into the actual top 15, which we're starting with the ride that many people have ridden, but it was a close call for me in particular. I'm talking about Excalibur at Valleyfair in Minnesota, which is one of 3 Aero SCS coasters ever built. The ride has a reputation for having low ridership, being frequently closed, located way in the back of the park away from everything else in an area prone to flooding, and for a while had been rumored to close year after year. Because of this, Excalibur was a big factor in wanting to visit the parks of Minnesota, since I knew it wouldn't be around forever. Upon arriving late last year, the scare came in that Excalibur had barely operated for the entire week before my stay. Apparently, the coaster closes for the season around Halloween, which is something I was clueless about going in. But as all hope seemed lost, I got word that because Valleyfair was short on staff, there were a bunch coming up from Schlitterbahn New Braunfels, another Cedar Fair property in Texas. Therefore, the park decided that they had enough staff to open Excalibur for the remainder of the season, which might have been the first time it's done so in close to a decade. The timing could not have been better, and Excalibur turned out to be my second favorite coaster in Minnesota, so I was a very happy camper. Number 14, Ice Mountain Bobsled and Big Timber Log Ride at Enchanted Forest in Oregon. Before making this video, I really only wanted one coaster per park to be featured on this list, but this had to be an exception because both of these attractions are very unique. For starters, Enchanted Forest is located in Oregon, which by itself is a rarity given the severe coaster drought in that part of the country. I visited in 2018 since my brother lives in Portland, and I was quite fond of the park, so I look forward to returning this year. As for the coasters, one is a rare E&F water coaster with a secluded setting in the woods. The other is a one-of-a-kind Ascot-designed family coaster that originally opened as an alpine slide. These 2 coasters are so weird and are in a park that is also weird, so this had to be on the list. Number 13, Blue Streak at Conneaut Lake Park in Pennsylvania. I think this would have been on the list had it not gone defunct lately, but the fact that it's now closed forever and has generated a lot of buzz in the coaster world makes it an even prouder credit of mine. I visited this small local park in 2019 for what would just so happen to be the coaster's last season of operation. While the ride was abysmally rough and void of any comfortable forces, it had a charming out and back layout through the woods and some of the best ride-ups out there. If you'd like to hear more about my experience, I have a review going more in depth, including the ride's unfortunate recent history. Number 12, Abandoned Mine at Uncle Bernie's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. By far the most insignificant coaster on this list is a small Molina & Sons kiddie coaster that has recently gone defunct. This was because the park was looking to replace it with something a bit more exciting, and that would end up being a Wacky Worm. Uncle Bernie's is located in South Florida and basically has become a meme. It features the only 2 coasters in the area, and the park is questionable to say the least. The next closest coasters after their 2 kiddie coasters are 3 hours away in Orlando, so it sparked some interest, and that's why I visited in 2018. Its remote location and recently defunct status makes Abandoned Mine one of the rarest coaster credits I have by far. Number 11, Hurricane at Fun Spot Kissimmee in Florida. Staying in the same state and heading 3 hours north is a ride that you might be surprised to see on this list. Literally no one else that I've seen go to this park have had the problem of missing the Hurricane credit, but my experience was wildly different. I had 4 days in Orlando this past trip, and on the second night decided to head back to this particular Fun Spot park. In addition to getting back on Mindblower, I was intrigued by this newly relocated and unique E&F High Miler that you can now only find at this park and this park only. Due to Florida's questionable weather, I was out waiting for this coaster and the rest of the major rides to open for what was probably 3 hours. Even when the rain sporadically disappeared, I had no luck. The next day, after Islands of Adventure, my friend Kobe from Coaster Watch was awesome enough to drive me back for another shot at Hurricane. When I got there, I was feeling more optimistic despite the dreary skies, because Mindblower and the rest of the tall attractions were operating. They even happily sold me a ticket to ride Hurricane, so I thought for sure I'd be getting on this time. When I got to the coaster, I asked the ride-off, and they said that they had to test it to make sure it was running at an appropriate speed. What I saw literally could not be explained. This coaster was flying at unnaturally fast speeds and supposedly hit the brake run 6 seconds before it was supposed to. They told me that this was because of the track still being wet from the rain, and to come back tomorrow when it was scheduled to be a sunnier day with higher demand. Despite my hesitation from the weather and past experience, my stepfather Hugh was able to get me a ride after SeaWorld, and as luck would have it, Hurricane was open. It was a janky mess of a ride with some weird airtime, but I really enjoyed it and appreciate the fact that not giving up worked in my favor. Number 10, Medusa Steel Coaster at Six Flags Mexico. Given the 21 million people in the Mexico City metro area alone, tons of the general public get to ride this coaster, which is why it's not higher. The main reason Medusa makes the list anyways is because it's a coaster much of the enthusiast community desire to ride, but don't get the chance to since it's all the way down in Mexico. This had to be my most anticipated coaster on my Mexico trip last May, and it lives up to its name for sure. I absolutely love its layout, pacing, and sequencing, plus if you catch a night ride, it is just wildly awesome. Like Blue Streak, I have a separate review diving deep into my experience, which I'd suggest watching if you're looking into riding this thing in the future. Number 9, Wild West Express at Adventure Park USA in Maryland. This small amusement park located 1 hour north of Washington, D.C. has 3 rides of interest for coaster enthusiasts, including my number 1 coaster Tumbleweed, my 300th credit Wildcat, and perhaps the rarest of the bunch, Wild West Express. This janky Zamperla Windstorm is the only permanent installation and originated in Old Town near Fun Spot Kissimmee. Although this park gets little attention in the coaster community, I've learned that Wild West Express is closed far more than the other coasters at the park. Even when I visited, the ride was listed as closed for maintenance on the website, probably because they didn't want to let any of their guests down in case it was closed. Though after looking on social media, I found recent videos at the park from 1 week prior, and the coaster was indeed open in the video. So we walked away with all 3 credits, and this was easily the most messed up one. It was an uncomfortable ride with some of the wonkiest transitions I've ever seen. That said, I really enjoyed getting the credit given my desire to ride as many unique coasters out there as possible. Number 8, Flying Turns at Knoebels in Elysburg, Pennsylvania. This coaster never used to be a rare credit, but since the park reopened from COVID closures in 2020, Flying Turns has become one of the most obscure credits in the country. This one-of-a-kind wooden bobsled coaster already suffered from unreliability due to rainwater getting in the trough, but was closed further because of retracking in 2020 and staffing shortages in 2021. This past season, Knoebels did open Flying Turns for ERT sessions during 2 Coaster Enthusiasts event, but that was it. The park found that it made much more sense to operate several smaller rides since Flying Turns requires a large crew to run. So ultimately, Flying Turns hasn't been open to the general public since 2019, which, to give some context, is also the last time Desperado ran with guests. All we can hope for is that it's back up and running this year, but if one thing's for certain, I'm very grateful that I had the chance to ride it in 2018 before all of the mayhem that happened in the world. Number 7, Insomnio at Cataplume in Mexico City. This clone of Freedom Flyer at Fun Spot Orlando isn't just in a harder to get location for American enthusiasts, but it's made much more unique because it goes off the side of a roof. This small park is very unique since it can be found on top of a large shopping mall, and the fact that some of the rides take advantage of this is great. Sure, Insomnio mostly makes this list because it's in Mexico and because a lot of you probably haven't heard of it, but it's a glass smooth invert with an added thrill of going off the building that I quite enjoyed. Number 6, Sandy's Blasting Bronco at Nickelodeon Universe in New Jersey. Talk about an unreliable coaster, because I know personally so few enthusiasts that have gone to this park and have actually ridden Sandy's. The park already suffers from arbitrary ride closures occasionally, but this coaster having reliability issues makes it even harder to obtain. Matter of fact, at the time of this video's recording, Sandy's Blasting Bronco hasn't operated in months due to repairs. That's why I'm amazed looking back that I got to ride it in June, because I couldn't have had a luckier day here. When a park of this size costs $80 to enter and doesn't even allow re-entry, you'll want to make sure that this coaster is running, which the fact that it usually isn't is probably the main reason so few enthusiasts decide to visit. Hopefully in the future, the ride is improved upon from a reliability standpoint, because it's actually my favorite coaster at the park above TMNT Shellraiser. Number 5, Raton Loco at Mundo Divertido in Tijuana, Mexico. Every time I open up my coaster count app, I'm constantly reminded by what coasters are the closest to me that I have not ridden. Since I happen to live in San Diego and have every obtainable Southern California credit, the next 2 on my list happen to be across the border in Tijuana. Now, I'd been putting this off for a while because many will tell you that it's not the safest city, and because it's not the kind of thing where you can just get up and do it if you feel like it. I had to correlate a plan if I wanted to do this with a group of friends, and we had the best day we possibly could have had in the city. If you'd like to see more, I'd highly encourage you to watch my most recent vlog, which entirely covers our day. Between the 2 coasters at this small park, the largest was a Wild Mouse, which is kinda sad, although it is a rare model. Manufactured by L&T Systems, I believe only 6 of their Wild Mice were ever built, which makes it an obscure credit by that standard and also by the remoteness of being in Mexico. But I really enjoyed the park and had no regrets, so I'm happy to say that this is one of my absolute rarest coaster credits to date. Number 4, Pteranodon Flyers at Islands of Adventure in Florida. This is the one coaster on this list that frankly shouldn't be a rare credit at all, considering it's at one of the highest attended parks in the country. But unfortunately, despite the fact that I wouldn't even consider it a kiddie coaster and instead more of a family coaster, you do need a child to ride it. Luckily for me, I grew up visiting this park and I know for sure that this is one of the attractions I did experience. Now, do I really remember the ride? No. But am I able to brag about having the credit? Oh yeah. This is a ride that pissed off so many enthusiasts because it really shouldn't have a height limit, but it does. Of course, many true kiddie coasters are this way too, so what really elevates Pteranodon Flyers is the ride model. The ride was built by Set Point Manufacturing, who only ever built 3 other coasters, and only one of those 3 is operating in Singapore. The fact that it's such a rare type of attraction, which likely isn't the most known, and the fact that it has these obnoxious rules make it a truly rare credit to have on this list. Number 3, Axis, at S&S Worldwide in Logan, Utah. In late 2020, my friend Josiah from National Coasters told me he needed a group of people to go with him in order to experience this prototype roller coaster. It was super last minute and required somewhat expensive flights, but still, I just had to take up the opportunity. A chance like this might not ever come up again in my life, and you've probably seen a video or 2 on this ride, but the fact that matters is that this isn't any prototype roller coaster. No, this is a great ride on its own. The launch was amazing and still the only compressed air launch I've experienced so far. The flipping was so smooth, the track was so smooth, and seriously, you guys are in for a treat when this hits the park. I assure you that this is not just because of the bias that I have. This is an amazing concept, and when we see a full-size version get built, I will do whatever I can to go out and experience it. Number 2, Dania Beach Hurricane at Boomers in Florida. When I tell people I got to ride this as a kid, they either think one of 2 things. They're either amazed or don't know what this thing is. That alone should tell you why this is one of my proudest credits to date. Just like Abandoned Mine at Uncle Bernie's, it was located in Fort Lauderdale, more specifically Dania Beach, and was the only major coaster to ever operate in South Florida. And I mean it when I say it was major, because this is the kind of ride where if you're a parent driving home from work and you call to ask when they'll be home, they'll tell you, yeah, I just passed the roller coaster, I'll be home soon. Truly, it was an iconic ride for the area, and from what I've heard, it was a good one too. Now, we don't actually remember the experience like Pteranodon Flyers, but it had a solid layout and appeared to be relatively smooth. Plus, by far, it was the largest coaster to ever operate at a Boomers location. Even after it closed, I would always visit family in the area and would stare in awe as we drive by this huge SB&O coaster, and now that it's demolished, I have a sour taste in my mouth when we drive by the open land. Hopefully, the coaster drought in South Florida ends with that proposed Nickelodeon Universe Park, because as of right now, you've either got to go to Orlando or you're stuck with absolutely nothing. Number 1, Bullet, at Selva Mexica in Guadalajara, Mexico. This ride is probably most well known for being in El Toro Ryan's Mexico series, where he attempted to ride it but failed. It since had a reputation for its reliability, which along with its unique experience made it a top bucket list coaster for me at the time. Fast forward a few years later, and I can now say that Bullet is my proudest and most obscure coaster credit. Guadalajara alone has very few roller coasters, and this is easily the only truly major one, but there's so much more to it than its remote location. The reason so many enthusiasts desire to get on it is because it is the only portable shuttle loop coaster Schwarzkopf ever built. The ride started on the European Fair circuit and has since found its way to Florida, the UK, Austria, and much more. But now it's relocated to Mexico, which seems to be its true permanent home until the end of its service life. Therefore, I'm so glad I was able to ride it, since it's a piece of roller coaster history, it's an intense and awesome ride, and it's so dang obscure. But that's just 15 of my rarest coaster credits, which leads me to ask about yours. What are your rarest coasters, either because of your experience, the ride's uniqueness, or a remote location? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.